In his 1999 book, Jesus, Apocalyptic Prophet of the New Millennium, Bart Ehrman writes, Jesus thought that the history of the world would come to a screeching halt, that God would intervene in the affairs of this planet, overthrow the forces of evil in a cosmic act of judgment, and establish his utopian kingdom here on earth. And this would happen in Jesus' own generation. Now, most skeptics and critics will often look at passages like Matthew 24 or Mark 13 or Luke 21, and in light of the number of failed modern prognostications, they will look at those passages and attempt to argue that Jesus' prophecy there similarly failed. Now, I think it's worth pointing out that most of these critics make their arguments in light of modern evangelicalism's grasp of premillennial dispensationalism. They'll point to works like Ehrman's in the religious context, or they'll point to secular works like Leon Festinger's When Prophecy Fails, and they will attempt to retrodirect some of those arguments backward into history. For skeptics, to me at least it seems, they're wielding something of a double-edged sword. They'll attack Christians who believe the words of Jesus with those words, even though they themselves don't believe them. When you add to their skepticism that they will often say that there's no way to know what Jesus said, or much less believed in that regard, the problem becomes even more confounded. So with that being said, welcome to the BLOGCAST. I'm Triggerman1976. Let's roll that beautiful title card. The issue of whether or not Jesus is a failed apocalyptic prophet is one that's filled much debate, it seems, on the internet. Now, one thing I have noted in my blog post about these discussions is that there's often a failure to define our terms. So we need to ask a question. What exactly is prophecy? Now, in her essay on the subject in the Lexham Bible Dictionary, Gretchen Ellis defines the term as a divine message mediated through an individual that is directed at a person or people group and is intended to elicit a response. Now, H.B. Huffman, in his entry in the subject on the Anchor Bible Dictionary, notes that in the context of the ancient Near East, this idea is broadly represented across multiple cultures. Now, in her essay, Ellis notes that prophecy generally has two functions. Usually it can be predictive or admonitive. And in the biblical context, there seems to be a significant overlap between the two. Now, in the biblical context, she adds that prophecy essentially has three goals. First, to bring repentance. Second, to renew trust or to give comfort. And third, to generate an action. Now, in the biblical context, specifically, we find instructions on how to deal with prophets. We find these in Deuteronomy 18, 21 to 22, which gives us a specific test how to deal with these situations. There it reads, when a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the word does not come to pass or come true, that is a word that the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You need not be afraid of him. Now, a few months ago, Dustin, the non-alchemist, published a video titled Jesus Made a Mistake, where he references part of a discussion that he had with atheist philosopher Felipe Leon. While that's an interesting discussion in itself, it's what Dustin says at the end of the video that's of interest for this.
What if Jesus was a failed apocalyptic prophet? Many Christians will no doubt bristle at such a question. but at the same time haven't seriously considered the evidence in favor of this possibility. Not exploring our options is bad, though. We don't want to limit our options for explaining things, and so all the data surrounding the historical Jesus needs to be discussed and thought about before coming to a conclusion about what we should do with a major world religion like Christianity. So, here's what we know. The earliest traditions in the Gospels emphasize the foundational importance of the imminent arrival of God's kingdom. The coming of the Son of Man, an end times judgment figure from Daniel, is consistently emphasized, along with several passages where Jesus is depicted as predicting the end of the world within his own generation. This explains the sense of urgency in various places in the New Testament, as well as makes sense of the ethical framework of the writers. Further, the earliest letters we have show that the early Jesus followers believed exactly what I've been describing about the imminent end, and only later are such expectations watered down. In light of this, what Christians need to ask themselves is this: what is the best explanation of the data? Not, can I come up with an explanation that makes my beliefs consistent with the data?
Now, I partly agree with what Dustin says here. Our beliefs should be derived from the data. But where do we get our data from? Well, we get that from passages where the words of Jesus or the words attributed to Jesus are found, and passages like those under question: Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. So we need to ask some basic, simple questions like, what did Jesus actually say? And what did Jesus actually mean? Now, one of the problems I've noticed is that when we, and by we I mean both Christians and atheists, is that we don't actually read the text. Often what we do is read what others have said and try to read that into the text. How often do we simply take a step back and read the text? Simply take it for what it says at face value. A good place to start this discussion, specifically with this video here, is with this video here, where I do have a rather extensive discussion on Mark 13. But for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to rehearse everything that was said there. But when we read those passages like Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, discussions always seem to fall around what is said about the second coming of Christ, of which a good example is found in Mark 13, verses 24 to 26, where Jesus says, "But in those days after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory." Now, there's two questions when it comes to this particular passage that never seems to be asked. The first question is, what is the context of the statement? The answer for a careful reader should be the destruction of the temple, since everything that Jesus is discussing here is in reference to his temple prophecy. The second question is, and it's one that seems to be ignored, who is they? Now, the obvious antecedent is the powers of heaven. The problem is that reference really doesn't seem to mean anything to us. Well, why is that? Now, I would contend that it's largely because we're ignorant of the context in which these statements are being made and how the prophecy is to be played out. And if you'd like to know more about this, you can check out this video here. Now, there's no easy way to answer this question. And that's not to say that the answers aren't there. It's just that they would take more time to explain than can be put into one video. And then there's the question of whether or not we're willing to even accept those answers. Fundamentally, though, the question that needs to be asked, especially in regard to passages like Matthew 24, Mark 13, or Luke 21, is, where did Jesus ever say that he was coming back? Much less to this earth. Simply put, he didn't. Where does he say that the world was going to end? He doesn't. Now, we have to ask, if he didn't actually say those things, then what's the problem? That's why the only answer that Dustin and anyone like him deserves when they raise such questions is the answer that Jesus gave to his opponents. You're wrong because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. Well, that's all for this video. I'm Sugarman1976. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Sugarman1976. Be sure to subscribe for more content like this. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. And if you found it interesting, please share it with your friends. And if you'd like to support me, you can pick up a copy of my debut action thriller, A Turning of Shadow. It's on Amazon. It's in paperback and Kindle. Be sure and check it out. And until next time, friends, God bless.